Walnut here, back with you with the final regulations part. That's right, I said final regulations part of part 61. Amazing that we've come this far and we're so close to being done. Today we're going to be looking at the final subpart of part 61, and that's going to be the one that deals with our CFI. So if we scroll down, look at all the parts we've already covered, and now we're down to subpart H, flight instructors other than flight instructors with a sport pilot rating. Let's take a look and see what we have here. So of course, as with any reg that we've talked about, we have to have our applicability. And this subpart prescribes the requirements for the issuance of flight instructor certificates and ratings, except for flight instructor certificates with a sport pilot rating, the conditions under which those certificates and ratings are necessary, and the limitations on those certificates and ratings. So just like the rest of the applicabilities, we're dealing with the issuance, the conditions, and the limitations. So without further ado, let's get started. 61.183 eligibility. You want to be a flight instructor, or better yet, you have a customer that'd like to be a flight instructor. What do they need to do to be eligible? Well, it says to be eligible for a flight instructor certificate or rating, a person must be at least 18 years of age. So, technically, could you do your commercial pilot certificate in the morning and your CFI in the afternoon? Yes, you could. You could definitely do that because that meets the requirements. I don't think you're going to find an examiner who would want to do that because that is an extremely long day, but technically you could definitely do that. Or better yet, you could do your commercial on one day and then the next day do your CFI. You can definitely do that. But nonetheless, you've got to be at least 18 years. Can you start training on it before 18 years of age? Yes, you can. Absolutely. And that's very important to know that, like we talked about in the commercial, you don't have to be 18 to start your training. As with the other ratings and certificates we've talked about, be able to read, speak, write, and understand the English language. Unless they're unable, but the FAA can give them special operating limitations if need be. Letter C here, hold either a commercial pilot certificate or airline transport pilot certificate with an aircraft category and class rating that is appropriate to the flight instructor rating sought. Meaning, if I want to be an airplane flight instructor, I've got to hold a commercial airplane, either single or multi, whatever kind of one I want to do, to be able to do that. So if I want to flight instruct in multi-engine airplanes, I've got to hold a commercial multi-engine airplane pilot certificate. And it says, and an instrument rating or privileges on that person's pilot certificate that are appropriate to the flight instructor rating sought, if applying for either one of these here down below. But let's stop here because it says, hold either a commercial pilot certificate or airline transport pilot certificate with an instrument rating. Here's a little something that you probably didn't know. If you were to look at your commercial pilot certificate that has an instrument rating on it, you would actually see the word commercial pilot certificate, and then it would say airplane or instrument airplane. Okay? What happens when you get your ATP certificate is the writing on your pilot certificate that says instrument airplane goes away. And why is that? So it'll basically just say airline transport pilot, airplane single engine, airplane multi-engine, and that's it. It won't say instrument rating. And why? Because it's understood, it is in the regs in 61.153 that the prerequisite to have an ATP certificate is to have an instrument rating. So therefore, when you actually get your ATP certificate, you will not see the word instrument rating on the back of your pilot certificate any longer. Okay? That's kind of like a neat thing to understand there. So we continue on with number 2 here, where it says, a flight instructor certificate with an airplane category, it's single engine class, a flight instructor certificate with an airplane category, multi-engine class, and then a powered lift rating, or a flight instructor certificate with an instrument rating. So those are when you actually positively need to have an instrument rating is on one of those 4 items. And that would mean that if you're going to be preparing for a rotorcraft, any form of rotorcraft, whether it be helicopter or gyrocopter, and you want to be a CFI, you don't need a instrument rating for that. So saith the regs. Going on to letter D here, says receive a logbook endorsement from an authorized instructor on the fundamentals of instruction listed in 61-185 of this part, appropriate to the required knowledge test. Now look, this is a problem here, because if we actually go and we bring up the advisory circular, there's actually an endorsement in there to take the FOI test. It says here that you must have a logbook endorsement from an authorized instructor on the FOIs listed in this part, appropriate to the required knowledge test, and then pass the knowledge test, just like it does in the other regs, and in the 120s and the 100s for private. They all say the same thing. However, there's a problem here with this that the FAA hasn't worked out. There's 61-183D that says you got to have a logbook endorsement. If you go to Advisory Circular 6165, there is the logbook endorsement in that advisory circular. But if you go into a testing center, the FAA's document that controls how a testing center is operated states that the test proctor need not see any form of qualifications to take this test. You simply just have to take the test. So we are dealing with kind of a conundrum here, in which the regs are saying something, but the advisory circular is saying something, but the FAA's testing doesn't say it. So what's the best thing to do? Always give it. That way you've done it. You always over-endorse if need be. If need be. You don't want to give like every single endorsement in the advisory circular just to go take a private pilot. If need be, and this is one of those need be situations. So with Delta and Echo, that would cover that. And it says here that you don't have to even take the FOI test if you already hold a flight instructor certificate, or if you already hold a ground instructor certificate issued under Part 61, because that means you've already had to show your your FOI test, and you only need to show it once. Also, if you hold a teaching certificate issued by a state, county, city, or municipality that are authorized the person to teach at an educational level of grade 7 or higher, or is employed as a teacher at an accredited college or university, okay? So if you have someone that is debating 2 or 3 and you don't know what to say, what's the best thing to do? The best thing to do is always get with the FAA about it, and they will help you with that. AFS 760, you can Google them. Well, wonderful, wonderful part of the FAA. They're very nice, always very courteous to me when I call. They never try to rush me off the line. Very nice. And they can answer questions like that as well as your local FSDO. If your aviation safety inspector that you talk to on the phone isn't a complete idiot, which would be kind of rare because most of them are. Let's go on to Foxtrot here. Pass a knowledge test on the aeronautical knowledge areas listed in 61-185, Alpha 2, and Alpha 3 of this part that are appropriate to the flight instructor rating sought. Now here's the deal. Just like the other ones we talked about, we haven't got to 185 yet, but we will in just a minute. And you have to pass that aeronautical knowledge test that is appropriate to the flight instructor rating sought. So if you're going to take airplane, it is called the FIA, Flight Instructor Airplane, or FIR, Flight Instructor Rotorcraft, or FIG, Flight Instructor Glider. Whichever one is the appropriate one for what you're going to take is what you have to take here. The FAA doesn't know which one you're going to take. So like I talked about in earlier regulation videos, because they don't know which one you're going to take, they have to be very generalized about it. Going on to paragraph G, receive a logbook endorsement from an authorized instructor on the areas of operation listed in 187. We haven't got to 187 yet, so we'll look at that in a minute. H, pass the required practical test that is appropriate to the flight instructor rating sought in an aircraft that is representative of the captain class of the aircraft rating sought, which means if you want to do single engine airplane, you couldn't do it in a multi-engine airplane and vice versa. Or you can do it in a flight simulator or an approved flight training device that is representative of the category and class of the aircraft for the rating sought and used in accordance with a course at a training center certificated under Part 1 and 42 of this chapter. Now, some of you may be asking a question, can I do my instructor ride or part of the instructor ride in one of the simulators at my school? Well, yes and no. The yes part would be yes, you absolutely could do it if it is called a flight simulator or a flight training device or FTD. And it has to be a representative of the category and class. But here's the big thing. What is FAR Part 142? What is that 142? 142 is literally like training for something holistically in a simulator. So like, for instance, if you've ever heard of companies like Flight Safety or CAE or SimCom or multiple other ones that use a simulator to test a pilot and to train a pilot, that is usually what we refer to as a 142 training center, and it has to be used in accordance with a course at a training center, which means that you must actually go to a training center that has a course for CFI in the simulator. Now, here's the funny part. There is not one. No one has this as of yet. So as of today, when this was made in September 2nd of 2019, currently there is nobody in the world that offers a CFI course in a simulator or flight training device. So almost as of right now, unless something very miraculous happens, this one is kind of like even a no-play thing, because it's just, it doesn't exist. So the FAA writes things in a lot of times, I think, for like future proofing, and that's what that means. If I'm looking at India here, it says accomplish the following only for a flight certificate with an airplane or glider rating. So only for airplane and glider rating CFIs. They have to receive a logbook endorsement from an authorized instructor indicating that the applicant is competent and possesses instructional proficiency in stall awareness, spin entry, spins, and spin recovery procedures. After providing the applicant with flight training in those training areas in an airplane or glider as appropriate, that is certificated for spins. So you have to have training which is on all of this. So you don't just go up with your client and simply just do a spin, because it says you must possess instructional proficiency in stall awareness, spin entry, spins, and spin recovery procedures. So there are 4 things you have to do with your student in order to meet that requirement. And it says demonstrate instructional proficiency in stall awareness, spin entry, spins, and spin recovery procedures. However, upon presentation of the endorsement specified in paragraph India 1 of this section, an examiner may accept that endorsement as satisfactory evidence of instructional proficiency in stall awareness, spin entries, spin recovery procedures for the practical test, provided that the practical test is not a retest. As a result, the applicant failed in the previous test for deficiencies in knowledge and skill awareness, procedures. If you remember all the way back in 61.49, where I told you that on the CFI exam, if you fail a CFI exam, specifically on stalls and spin awareness, you would actually have to bring back an airplane to that exam and literally go up and do spins, spin recoveries, spin entry, stall awareness, all that stuff. Because it says right here that you have to. An examiner may accept that endorsement as satisfactory evidence of instructional blah, 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 provided that the practical test is not a retest as a result of the applicant failing the previous test for deficiencies in the knowledge or skill of stall awareness, spins, entries, spins, recovery, instruction procedures. If the retest is a result of deficiencies in the ability of an applicant to demonstrate knowledge or skill of stall awareness, spin, entry, spins, and spin recovery, instructional procedures, the examiner must test the person on stall awareness, spin entry, spins, and spin recovery instructional procedures in an airplane or glider as appropriate that is certificated for spins. So you will not have a choice. And if it's ever happened where you didn't do it on the second go, then the examiner should have their certificate pulled because they're not doing their job, and that is what we refer to as a Santa Claus, and I hate Santa Claus examiners. How else can you know what you're supposed to know if you don't have a person who's the epitome of aviation knowledge telling you? I'm kind of speaking a little bit overboard there, but how are you supposed to know that you have the ability to do what you're supposed to do if you don't have someone who is trained in the art of actually seeing that you know these things? So don't send your student unprepared. Prepare them. Remember what the FOI says. Sending someone to the check ride without them being ready is a breach of faith with that client. Have some pride in your work, okay? Paragraph J, log at least 15 hours as pilot in command in the category and class of aircraft that is appropriate to the flight instructor rating sought. So let's say that you have an airplane single engine CFI and you want to get your airplane multi-engine CFI, but all you have is a commercial multi with about 8 hours of training and your 1.3 hours in the check ride, which is your PIC, and that's the only PIC you've had since that time. Well, 1.3 minus 15, or vice versa there, you're going to have to go up and fly an additional 13.7 hours as pilot in command before you can actually go do this. And this doesn't really matter what category and class you pick. It doesn't matter. You got to have 15 hours of pick in the category and class that you're wanting to get that flight instructor rating for. But all you have is a commercial multi with about 8 hours of training and your 1.3 hours in the check ride, which is your PIC, and that's the only PIC you've had since that time. Well, 1.3 minus 15, or vice versa there, you're going to have to go up and fly an additional 13.7 hours as pilot in command before you can actually go do this. And this doesn't really matter what category and class you pick. It doesn't matter. You got to have 15 hours of pick in the category and class that you're wanting to get that flight instructor rating for. And lastly, comply with the appropriate sections of this part that apply to the flight instructor rating sought. Comply with the appropriate sections of this part that apply to the flight instructor rating sought, which is what we're going to get on next. Okay, so what kind of knowledge do you need to know? Well, as far as knowledge goes, it's a little bit different from what we've seen in the private and with the commercial, and this is really kind of a holistic view. Look at this. It says here, a person who is applying for a flight instructor certificate must receive and log ground training from an authorized instructor on the following items. 1. The FOIs, including the learning process, elements of effective teaching, student evaluation and testing, course development, lesson planning, and classroom training techniques. I tell you what's a little bit different here. Right now, we currently have the PTS, get the ACS rolling out in June of 2020. Whoop, whoop. I'm a big ACS fan. I'm a complete dork when it comes to this stuff, so I'm really excited about the ACS coming out. But here's the deal. If you can see here, there's only 6 things. What's really weird is the PTS for CFI lists 7 things, and the PTS for CFII lists 7 things, but the list is different. So it really does matter which one you're going to be looking at. And the ones for the FOI and the CFII are always overlooked. And let me tell you why they're always overlooked. The only CFI check ride that you have to actually talk about fundamentals of instruction is only the initial. Every single time you do an add-on, the FOIs are never in your add-on CFIs because of the table, additional rating and task table says that you need not test on FOIs. So if you don't do your CFII as an initial, you'll never even see the II FOIs, which are literally a little bit different than the CFI, and I'll let you look for yourself. They don't match up correctly. There is differences. It's crazy how different they are, but the same, but different. They're written different. They should be written exactly the same, but they are not. Another way that the FAA kind of skimped there on that. And number 2 says the aeronautical knowledge areas for recreational, private, commercial, applicable to the aircraft category for which flight instructor privileges are sought. Which means that if you're going to be single engine, you actually have to know recreational stuff. If you are going to go initial multi-engine airplane instructor, you need not know recreational. Why? Because there are no recreational multi-engine airplanes. So therefore, recreational pilot only deals with single engine. So if you're going to do your multi-engine initial CFI for airplane, you don't need to study recreational. Moving on to number 3, the aeronautical knowledge areas for the instrument rating sought. So if you're going to do instrument rating, you got to do that. Let's skip over that for now. And of course, we probably can skip over the other ones here because it says the following applicants need not comply with paragraph A1. So let's go back to A1. So A1 says the FOIs. So to receive a logbook of ground training from authorized instructor on the fundamentals. And you need not comply with B here. I'm sorry, that is totally separate. So B1, the holder of a flight instructor certificate or ground instructor certificate if a current teacher or employed as a creditor one, just like we talked about up in 61-183 already. That's literally a mirror image of that. So that takes care of everything in 61-185 that you need to know for the ground portion. Now, I want you to know this, that when in regards to this here, that means you must know everything in whatever that reg number is for recreational. I forget what it is, but 105 and 125, all that you have to know. The aeronautical knowledge areas for those, yeah, 105, 125, and whatever it is for there. I think that's 100 or 101. I can't remember, but it's somewhere around. Oh, no, it's not. I think it's 97, 6197. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and finish up with 187 here, and that's flight proficiency. Anyway, big reg, only one paragraph applies to you, and it basically mimics the PTS, so it's not all that. A person who is applying for a flight instructor certificate must receive a log flight and ground training from an authorized instructor on the areas of operation listed in the section that apply to the flight instructor rating sought. The applicant's logbook must contain an endorsement from an authorized instructor certifying that the person is proficient to pass a practical test on those areas of operation. So that is a little bit different from the other ones that we've seen here, where it actually has that little clause in there. But let's keep on going on. So Bravo 1 is for an airplane category rating with a single engine class, FOIs, technical subject areas, pre-flight. That's right. It's exactly right, everything right out of the PTS for single engine. Okay. There's the whole list right there, 1 through 14. They're not the same. So if you're going to do multi-engine, just to understand that multi-engine has 15 items. So they're not the same. They're very close to being the same, but they're not the same. So make sure you go to the respective one that you're supposed to go to. And again, it says flight proficiency, and it says fundamentals of instruction. Flight proficiency, fundamentals of instruction. That means you must know how to teach in an airplane. In the airplane. Actually inside of the aircraft, you have to use all of your FOI skills to do that. So you must receive training on actually how to instruct in the airplane, which is very important. I think very important, because that's where a lot of people screw this up. Is they don't think about that. They try to look at this as a commercial pilot exam, and I'm like, no, this is not a piloting exam. This is a flight instructor exam. Stop trying to look at it as a pilot exam. So don't do that. That's the reason why people fail multiple times, because they get hung up. So that's all we need to know there in 61-187, and we'll scroll all the way down to the end of that. C here, so just make sure we cover that. We covered A and B, and C here is also something that is, but read this. It says the flight training required by this section may be accomplished in an aircraft that is representative of the aircraft category class or in a flight simulator. And again, this is what was talked about up in 183. It's literally a mirror image of that. Okay. the last one we'll talk about for today, then we're going to have an additional video on this because we're going to break it down. The rest of the stuff is kind of lengthy, and I don't want you to get saturated in this stuff. So, flight instructor records. A flight instructor must sign the logbook of each person to whom that instructor has given flight training or ground training. Yes, you absolutely, positively must document the training, especially if it's required for a certificate or a rating. Or some type of privilege. Yes, you must sign the logbook of each person. You know, when I was a DPE, I would be in the exam, and then somebody would be in, and, you know, I would be looking at the whole entire situation. The person's coming unprepared, and how they're dressed, and were they on time, and how they got the desk laid out when I walk into the room, and you know, I just start looking. That makes me want to look for things, and so I just start looking and delving into every single thing I could possibly look for. And this is one of the things I would look for was, do you have your ground training logged? And you know what? Depending on my mood that day, if they didn't have the ground training logged, 99 out of 100 times, I would simply just say, sorry, we can't do the ride. The other 1% of the time, I would say, in order for me to start this ride, you're going to have to show me where you did ground school with this person, or I'm not going to start the ride. Either way, I wouldn't start the ride unless I saw that ground training being presented to me. I don't go and read every single line of every single one and look at training per something. I just say, show me your ground training log for private, show me your ground training log for instrument or whatever it is, and it should match up to what is in the respective number, like 6165 or 61105 or 61125. I should at least see something that closely aligns with that to make sure that all the training has been done. If an examiner doesn't want to be with you, they'll look for very nitpicky stuff like that. The examiner's supposed to be looking for that stuff anyway, but you can get somebody on all kind of crazy junk. You know, even I open up the POH and I'm like, you know, let me just look and see if this pilot operating handbook is the most current pilot operating handbook for the airplane. Let's just see if it's had any changes to it. You know, what edition is it on? And I would just look at the manufacturer's website and I go, the POH for this airplane is a Mike model, and it's up to change with 14. It's had 14 revisions, revision number 14 or 27, and I'll look in there, it only has 4 revisions in it. I'm like, sorry, the airplane's not airworthy. I'm not going to go today because you don't have all the current revisions. And then everybody starts jumping through their own rear end because they're not keeping the proper records and doing what they're supposed to do. So bottom line is multiple different ways for the examiner to kind of not start, and that's a very good way for the examiner to not start the ride theirs because you haven't given the proper record keeping. Also here, a flight instructor must maintain a record in a logbook or a separate document that contains the following: the name of each person whose logbook that instructor has endorsed for solo flight privileges. What kind of solo flight privileges? Well, that's like a 6187 November, a 6187 Papa, a 6187 Oscar, a 6193 Charlie 3. All those are solo flight privileges, and the date of that endorsement, as well as the name of each person that the instructor has endorsed for a knowledge test or practical test, and the record shall indicate the kind of test, the date, and the results. And lastly, you're supposed to keep those records for approximately 3 years. So here's the deal. You gotta sign the logbook for every time you give ground or flight, and you must keep a record of every solo endorsement, every knowledge test endorsement, and practical test endorsement, and it must have the kind of test, date, and results for the test. As far as the solo, I don't think you need to write the results for the solo. Hopefully it was lived or something along that line for that. So don't need to put the results up there for that. All right, so that's that with that. When we come back, we're only going to be talking about a couple of ones that apply to us, and there are not that many left. And we'll be finished with the regulations because I don't want to have a super long video, and that's the reason why I'm doing this. So tune in next time, and we'll finish up the CFI regulations with just a couple of 4 more regs, and we'll be done. I'm Todd Shelnut with CFI Pro Courses. Bye-bye.